I'm David Feldman, and this is the mop up for May 31st, 2023. I stopped eating at Chick fil A years ago when I discovered its CEO, Dan Cathy, was donating millions to anti LGBTQ groups, helping them fight same sex marriage. Plus, I always felt it was somewhat hypocritical for a fast food restaurant that sells chicken to pass judgment on how people make love, considering the female chicken's cloaca. Now, take a look at this. As you can see, a chicken has a cloaca, which means she shares her reproductive organs with her digestive system. To put it delicately, the eggs that come from a chicken have been fertilized via sodomy in a manner that runs counter to good Christian homophobic values. For bigots who are against same sex marriage and same sex adoptions, for the bigots at Chick fil A who call themselves Christians to oppose same sex marriage and same sex adoptions, how dare they? How dare they have no problem literally eating the progeny of sodomy? I don't mean to be rude, but eggs and chicken are the progeny of sodomy. Look at the map of a chicken's body. Look at the cloaca. That is both the orifice for fertilization and the digestive system. And I, for one, will not sit idly by while intolerant bigots are tricked into literally eating Satan's spawn. I will not have it. Chicken is the devil's handiwork, and it should be banned. It should be banned. Good Christians should not be eating chicken. Learn about the cloaca. Where is Florida on this? Where is Governor DeSantis on this? Why is he allowing chickens in Florida to reproduce with their cloacas? Why do they allow Chick-fil-A to sell these disgusting animals, the progeny of sodomy, in Florida? That is why I don't eat at Chick-fil-A. Nobody should, because of the cloaca. Plus, the CEO of Chick-fil-A is named Dan Cathy. Dan Cathy. And that doesn't seem like the proper name for a right-wing homophobe, does it? Dan Cathy. Dan Cathy is the name given to weekend warriors on Fire Island. Dan Cathy is what you call the married guy with 5 kids visiting Provincetown on the down low. Hey, look, it's another Dan Cathy. Better not tell his wife about Teddy. Well, Chick-fil-A is facing a boycott from me, and it's also facing a potential boycott from the far right. For example, Charlie Kirk, the college dropout, Koch brothers funded bully who runs Turning Points USA, he is now offended that Chick-fil-A has hired a diversity officer. And when he checked out the website, Charlie Kirk discovered that Chick-fil-A insists the company believes, quote, "We are better together." The website over Chick-fil-A goes on to say that better together means, quote, embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything we do. DEI. Chick-fil-A says it believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion by, quote, ensuring equal access, valuing differences, and creating a culture of belonging, unquote. And now the right wing is ready to boycott Chick-fil-A. The left hates Chick-fil-A. The right hates Chick-fil-A. You know, For a company that says it hates the LGBTQ community, it sure seems like Chick-fil-A goes out of its way to get it from both ends. A trial date was set on Tuesday for Peter Navarro, Donald Trump's former White House economic advisor, who was brought up on charges of contempt of Congress after he refused to testify before the January 6th committee. Navarro is also being charged with failure to produce documents subpoenaed by that committee, which disbanded earlier this year, back in January. Peter Navarro was ordered to testify about the role he played in spreading the lies that Donald Trump won in 2020. He refused to testify before the January 6th committee, so his trial was set on Tuesday for September 5th of this year. He goes before the same judge who presided in the trial of Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes, who was sentenced last week to 18 years for seditious conspiracy. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was found guilty of contempt of Congress last year after he refused to testify before the same January 6th committee. He is now looking at 4 months in jail, but he still walks free, waiting to appeal the verdict. Moscow was hit by at least 8 aerial kamikaze drones on Tuesday, hitting apartment buildings, shattering windows with nobody seriously injured. The attacks are said to be a reprisal for Russia targeting Ukraine's capital city of Kiev. The Biden administration said it didn't support the idea of Ukraine attacking Russia, but the Biden State Department on Tuesday intimated that the attacks on Moscow were well justified, considering that in May alone, Kiev has been struck 17 times by Russian missile attacks. Yesterday in Kiev, a Russian missile killed 1 woman and injured 11. The woman who accused Joe Biden of sexually assaulting her announced on Tuesday in Moscow that she is defecting to Russia. Tara Reid, a former staffer for then-Senator Joe Biden, came forward in 2020 claiming that Joe Biden pushed her against a wall in 1993 and assaulted her. Then-candidate Biden denied the charges. Tara Reid announced on Tuesday during an interview with Russian news agency Sputnik that she would like to gain Russian citizenship. The interview was conducted while she sat next to Maria Butina, a member of the Russian parliament. She's a new member of the Russian parliament. Before getting elected to the Russian parliament, Maria Butina was convicted and sentenced to 18 months in an American prison for infiltrating the National Rifle Association as a Russian spy in order to gain influence over Republican politicians. She was freed from jail in 2019 and then sent back to Russia. Tara Reid said, with the 2024 presidential election starting up, she no longer feels safe in America and is moving to Moscow for fear she might end up dead if she stays in America. The House Rules Committee on Tuesday, by a vote of 7-6, sent the new debt ceiling bill to Congress, where it is expected to be debated, voted on, and passed by the end of Wednesday evening. Then it moves to the Senate, where it is expected to pass. Mitch McConnell is on board. He's the Republican minority leader. So this bill should be signed by President Biden before June 5th, when the American government is expected to run out of money. It's called the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and it's only 99 pages, so all the lawmakers who can read have had a chance to pretend they have read it. In the new bill, America's debt limit, currently standing at $31.4 trillion, is raised until January of 2025. There's no cap. There's no ceiling. It can go as high as it needs to go, kicking the proverbial can down the road for the next Congress in 2025 and whoever is president then to place a future cap, if necessary, on the national debt. Now, to please Republicans, this bill increases military spending and now includes some work requirements for food stamps. If you're able-bodied and you're not homeless or a veteran, there's a limit to how much you can collect in food stamps, and you have to find work. Republicans also got a concession from Biden to streamline the permitting of energy projects like gas pipelines. Joe Manchin sealed that one, and there's a new pipeline leaving West Virginia starting later in the year because of this. But for Democrats, this is what the Democrats seem to have gotten. It leaves in place Joe Biden's executive order for giving $20,000 in federal student loans. Let me repeat, because this is important to my listeners. This new debt ceiling bill leaves in place Joe Biden's executive order for giving $20,000 in federal student loans. So if you have federal student loans and you make, I think it's less than $135,000 a year, you can get $20,000 of those loans forgiven. It doesn't touch Medicare, doesn't touch Social Security or Medicaid. Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy is putting this bipartisan bill before the House on Wednesday, which means members of the far-right Freedom Caucus are free to complain all they want, and they don't have to vote for it because it's bipartisan. There are enough Democrats who will vote for it. This isn't going to be 15 rounds like getting him elected speaker, because it's not along party lines. He's not running against Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, supports this. So we're not going to see 15 rounds. We're going to hear angry debate from Republicans, the members of the Freedom Caucus. But everyone I've spoken with tells me it's going to be a bumpy road until they vote. There'll be procedural tricks played to slow it down, but this thing is getting passed. Here is Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. He's a Republican. He's a despicable human being, always has been. He's against the new bill because it didn't get rid of public housing. He is opposed to all public housing because he's a racist, and he wants work requirements. The Wisconsin congressman wants work requirements in order to live in public housing because he claims public housing destroys the family. You know, as opposed to living out on the streets, which brings families together, but just for the warmth, because those streets get awfully cold in Sheboygan, Wisconsin during the winter. Here is the horrible, despicable, repulsive, and putrid Republican congressman from Wisconsin, Glenn Grothman.
But they left low-income housing untouched. I think as far as discouraging work and discouraging marriage, I think low-income housing is even a more dangerous program than the food stamps. So I'm including low-income housing in the mix of having work requirements. The amendment as drafted just includes Section 8 housing, which is an error on my part because there are other low-income housings as well. But that's what we have before us. I would appreciate it if you'd let that to the floor, because I don't think our team fought on the low-income housing front at all.
So that is what Republicans really believe. He's a far-right extremist, but he's speaking what even Kevin McCarthy believes, that there should not only be work requirements to live in public low-income housing, but there shouldn't be low-income housing. It should just be a Hobbesian nightmare for low-income Americans. He is a racist. He is a racist. And if this guy sounds familiar, I played a clip of him last week. I think it was Thursday. Now, last Thursday, while they were debating the debt ceiling, the very racist Congressman Grothman from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, They were debating the debt ceiling, but he decided to bring something else up besides the debt ceiling. He decided to complain about how hard it is these days for white guys who aren't gay.
A study was done a little while ago on the federal judiciary. I wish we had these studies for all other appointments by the Biden administration. And apparently his first 2 years, President Biden had appointed 97 federal judges. Of the 97 federal judges, I was expecting maybe 25 or 30 were white guys, because I know President Biden wasn't heavy on appointing more white guys. 5 of the 97 judges were white guys. Of those, 2 were gay. So almost impossible for a white guy who's not gay, apparently, to get appointed here.
That is the racist, homophobic Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And if you see the C-SPAN chyron, you can ascertain that they are debating the federal spending and debt limit, but the racist, homophobic Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, decided, let's talk about how tough it is for straight white guys. Very germane to the conversation, you racist. You know, it's hard to believe, but much of the antipathy towards social spending in America, much of the opposition to social spending is because racists like Glenn Grothman think the social spending goes only towards black people. When in fact, per capita, and you can Google this, per capita, white people are more likely to go on food stamps or welfare or public housing. They're going to need public housing and Medicaid. White people per capita are the bigger recipients of all the social programs, all the things that keep people alive. But that doesn't matter. The truth, as we've learned with Republicans, it doesn't matter. Republicans don't want to make their corporate donors pay taxes. That's why they're sent to Washington, D.C. So they want to cut social services, and they're sadistic. They go to satisfy the richest 1% and their bloodlust. They want to punish poor people. They get off on that because they're sexually dysfunctional. And people like Glenn Grothman, who's a lawyer, the best way to get low information voters on board cutting taxes and kicking people off Medicaid, food stamps, kicking them out of public housing or work requirements. The easiest way to do that with low information voters is convincing them that black people are the largest recipients of government handouts. It's a lie. It's simply not true. But these low information voters want to believe it. They vote their hatred. They vote their racism. And of course, they end up hurting themselves because the ones who believe this about black people are the ones who need public housing, Medicaid, food stamps. It's a trick the devil plays on low information voters. Glenn Grothman is a lawyer. He's an idiot, but he knows what he's doing. He's a racist idiot. He isn't just against public housing. He's against the holiday that celebrates Martin Luther King. He's against Kwanzaa. This is who these people are. Glenn Grothman, says what you kind of use dog whistles to hide behind, but he's out in front. This is who the Republicans really are. It's who Kevin McCarthy is. Speaker McCarthy has alienated the far-right Freedom Caucus, who have been coiled like a snake in the grass, waiting for a moment like this to pounce, to lunge, to call a vote on replacing him. Remember, all it takes is one member of the Republican caucus to demand a vote on who should be Speaker. That's the concession McCarthy made in order to win. the speakership. He has a lot of enemies in the Republican Party in the House. Here is Dan Bishop. He's a Republican from North Carolina. They're not complaining about the debt ceiling bill, really. They're complaining about McCarthy. This guy hasn't even read what's in the bill. They just want to get McCarthy. Here is North Carolina Republican Dan Bishop.
Who do you think would have done a better job negotiating this than Speaker McCarthy? Who you think should be in the Speaker's chair?
Well, there are 434 other members of Congress. Nobody could have done a worse job.
Nobody could have done a worse job out of the entire Congress, including the Democrats and Hakeem Jeffries. North Carolina Republican Dan Bishop says nobody could do a worse job in the House than the Speaker, the Republican Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Congressman Lauren Boebert took time off from telling the police that her son is fine and that her soon-to-be ex-husband wasn't beating him. She took time out of her busy schedule. I don't know if you heard the 911 call of the son saying, my dad's beating me up. And then Lauren Boebert calls 911 back and says, he's not really beating him up. In her defense, the police did come out after the call. And according to what I've read, in her defense, there were no physical marks on the son. And that should be reported. A lot of people on the left have been making fun of the 911 call and talking about how Jason Boebert, the father, beat the kid up. And then Lauren Boebert called 911 back and said, don't come out. The police did come out. They examined the kid, and there were no physical marks. That's the official report. I don't know if that's true, but I think you should report that, even though we do not approve of the Boebert family. Well, here is Congressman Lauren Boebert speaking out against Kevin McCarthy's debt ceiling compromise with Joe Biden.
Tomorrow's bill is a bunch of fake news and fake talking points that will do nothing to rein in out of control federal spending. If every Republican voted the way that they campaigned, they would vote against tomorrow's bad deal, because this is the very thing that we all campaigned to put an end to.
Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, who called the bill a turd sandwich over the weekend. By the way, he calls everything a turd sandwich. I found out that he had a threesome with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and he called that a turd sandwich. Well, actually, that is a turd sandwich. But he was a little more eloquent on Tuesday. Here he is pretty much threatening Kevin McCarthy's speakership.
That is why this group will oppose it. We will continue to fight it today, tomorrow, and no matter what happens, there's going to be a reckoning about what just occurred unless we stop this bill by tomorrow.
A reckoning. Very menacing. But you know what? Kevin McCarthy is a survivor. And, he's had to deal with the Freedom Caucus, these far-right Republicans before. He knows what they're like. He knows they want to inflict pain on ordinary Americans. Kevin McCarthy understands that people like Lauren Boebert and Chip Roy, this isn't about balancing the budget. It's satisfying the bloodlust of their constituents. And I think Kevin McCarthy is a lot smarter than he lets on. I think he slipped an Easter egg into this debt ceiling bill. Here he is on Tuesday talking to reporters. Pay attention. Pay close attention to what he says. Here he is telling reporters why this debt ceiling bill is a good deal for Republicans because of what he has slipped into it.
For things we bought that we can return, like COVID money, money to China and others, we're bringing that back. We might have a child that has no job, no dependents, but sitting on a couch. We're going to encourage that person to get a job and have to go to work, which gives them worth and value.
Okay, I'm going to play the key sentence here.
We might have a child that has no job, no dependents, but sitting on a couch. We're going to encourage that person to get a job.
Now, I know you think, many of my listeners right now think it's not an Easter egg. You say, oh, that's a Freudian slip. But here is Kevin McCarthy on Fox News Tuesday night saying the same exact thing.
But we also did something different. In this family, we may have a child that able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual, so he's going to have work requirements. He's going to get a job, and it's going to make the life easier.
Now, that is not artificial intelligence, I promise you. That is Kevin McCarthy repeating what he said during his press conference. Some of you think it's a Freudian slip. Listen to it again.
In this family, we may have a child that able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual.
Able-bodied children who are not married, sitting on the couch, collecting welfare, not working. He said that. And that's how I think he's going to keep his speakership. That's how I think he gets the Freedom Caucus on board and stays in power, by putting children to work. I think he slipped it in to this budget ceiling bill. He said it during his press conference that able-bodied children sitting on their couch should have to work for their welfare. Then he went on Fox and said it again. I don't think it's a slip. I think it's an Easter egg. He wants able-bodied children to get off the couch and go get a job. And that's what's happening all over America in red states, like in Arkansas or Kentucky, where children no longer need permission from their parents to work incredibly dangerous jobs. Here's a news report from last week in Kentucky. Well, that was supposed to be a news report from Kentucky.
McDonald's franchise is being accused of hiring 10-year-olds. The Department of Labor says this was happening in Kentucky. The kids were not paid, yet sometimes worked as late as 2 a.m. The Labor Department says they made food, cleaned the store, worked the drive-thru, even managed the register. Oh, my goodness. So one of them even worked the deep fryer. You do have to be at least 16 to do that.
Yep, it's already happening. Kids working the deep fryer at McDonald's. Sure, it's illegal now in Kentucky for kids, 10-year-old kids to work the deep fryer? It's illegal now in Kentucky, but wait till we see what Kevin McCarthy slipped into this debt ceiling bill. I think Republicans in the Freedom Caucus will be pleasantly surprised to discover that pretty soon minors can now work as minors. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. If you enjoyed any of this, please share it with your friends. Please like it. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you're a regular listener to this show, you know that I read all the comments, and you can tell that I've read your comment because I hit the heart button next to it. And I appreciate the comments. I learn a lot. I make mistakes, and I correct myself on the show thanks to the people who leave comments. Please subscribe to my newsletter, office hours every Friday night at 8 p.m. If you'd like to attend, go to my website for the link or subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you to the mods in the chat room for keeping everybody on point. I love reading the chat room. Once again, thank you for listening. Stay strong and protect the weak.